Hey y'all, Monk Joseph here with the Broken Buddha. Today I'm going to start a new series called the S.O.S series, which stands for Survivors of Schizophrenics. To the people who this stuff doesn't apply to, I know some of you people are wondering why I keep posting these things. It is helping people, and I know I'm not getting my thousands of views that the Kung Fu stuff gets, but 100 people finding credibility in this, and it's helping them. So I'm going to keep going, and especially because it's helping me too. All right, so I am going to start this whole series. I'm going to try to keep it more coherent. I will try to keep my learning as I'm talking limited as I'm going through this. I'll try to only give you guys like completed information. So, and it really helps because I want to say it is impossible, actually impossible, to determine if the person who has been thrown out of your family or identified as sick, the individual person. I'm going to go ahead and say it's impossible for anyone to just figure out if they are the schizophrenic or if they are the victim of the schizophrenic that's still hiding in your family. Speaking personally, I am not going to speak towards a diagnosis or genetics, but I am the victim of the schizophrenic hiding in my family. And it'll be obvious by the time this is all done. Hopefully one day my family sees this and comes around and get healthy themselves, but I'm not going to hold my breath because, again, I do think that's impossible. So for today's episode 1, we're going to talk about false narratives and false connections. Schizophrenics, if you're in one of these families, you're already aware. And even if you're not schizophrenic or you don't have anybody schizophrenic in your family, you should watch this because it's some pretty scary stuff what I'm about to drop, all right? And it's only going to get worse and scarier if you're not already like, holy crap, do people like that actually exist? Yes, people like that actually exist. All right, so making false connections and false narratives. I'm just going to tell stories of the schizophrenics in my life and their false narratives and false stories so you can get an idea of what you're looking at here. So I'm going to go chronologically the best that I can. The first one coming to mind is when during the first Gulf War, when the first President Bush declared war in Iraq, in the Persian Gulf. Sorry, that was the first one. And it came on the news. My stepfather, who is the schizophrenic hiding in my family, he built this whole false narrative, right? And they didn't mention, the draft hadn't been enacted, but in his mind, the draft was going to get enacted. His name was going to get pulled. He was going to go to a war zone. So at the mere drop of this news brief that, the U.S. and Persian Gulf are getting into it, he starts crying hysterically at all these things that he created, this whole scenario that didn't exist. Nobody said the draft was coming back. That would take a long time in Congress. He didn't understand that he had, spiraled this whole fear that didn't exist. Like it was just them saying, "Hey, like we're beefing with these people," and to him it was just like they're going to bring the draft back. My number is going to get pulled because he was in the National Guard. I mean, he probably would have been not one of the first called up. I mean, if that would have happened, but they're not going to reenact the draft. Like so, the whole thing was null and void. The point is false narrative. Number 1. Okay, moving on. I'm gonna have to fast forward a lot because they're coming into my head kind of scattered, so I'll present them scattered, but they'll be legit. My stepfather's best friend got put in prison for being part of the Jared from Subway pedophile ring. When this was found out, I got a call from my mother, and I do believe that she is not as psychotic as my stepfather, but still schizophrenic to quite a degree. Might have been chemical induced, maybe genetic. I don't think I'll ever get to have an honest conversation, so it's hard to tell. So anyway, my stepfather's best friend gets busted for being part of the Jared from Subway pedophile ring, and she races home from work. She's working at Yale at the time. And then, so she's racing home for this whole, and I'm trying to figure out why she's racing home, and she had created a false narrative that they were best friends, so my stepfather could be involved, and if he is, when the police get there, he'll kill himself, so she has to race home from work to stop him from killing himself if he is involved, if the police arrive. And it was this whole narrative that she like created. I don't know if she did it just to get off from work early or if she wanted pity, but that's a lot of dots to connect that weren't there. And then again, this is where my logic breaks down with these things. Like, so you're willing to accept that your husband could be part of a pedophile ring and might kill himself over it, but you can't accept that he's like, hitting your son behind your back and lying about it. Like that's insane that you can accept that type of reality and possibility and connect those dots. But then when someone says, "Hey, this guy hurt me," please tell him to stop. Like nothing. It's just dead stare. And I actually realized I used to think my brother was mean because when my mom gets in that state, she just looks at you with dead eyes. And I remember my brother was 12. I'm going to clean up the language, but he said that she was unintelligent and mean. And it's because once she gets in that state, like she just fights and doesn't have, there's no reason behind it. There's no logic behind it. And my brother, Steven, probably didn't even know what schizophrenia was or that it existed when he was 12. So he didn't know how to go about this. Um, but again, people, they want to act like there's no signs. But the same brother, called my grandmother begging for help one time, and she should have told him to call 911. Like you're begging for help, terrified of a grown man assaulting you and your brothers. But for whatever reason, I guess no one ever told us, hey, call the police. I know your schools tell it to you, but when you have your mom and family telling you not to, it's nobody ever did, so it obviously works. Let's see, more false narratives. Let's see what else I got. That may be it for like the really heavy, clean ones. Oh, I remember one time I had what was identified as a vasovagal syncope at one point, where my heart had stopped. They said it was because of pressure on the vagus nerve, but that's just something that they tell you if they don't know what it is. I've been told that by other doctors. Anyway, so my heart stops in school once, and the doctors said to my mom that there was opiates in my system. And I was in an experimental phase and may have eaten like a painkiller that weekend, but I was not by any means like doing masses of opiates or pills or anything like that. So it'd be hard to, and I was so young when that happened. I mean, I don't think I was doing anything like that, but I mean, it is possible. The point is, here's the false narrative. In my mom's head, she believes that I overdosed on heroin in, it was like 11th grade or 10th grade, because a doctor said there was opiates in my blood. And I know they didn't say, hey, he overdosed on heroin, because that's not possible. And she was also trying to say that it was like, she tried she convinced herself that I had smoked weed laced with so much heroin that I overdosed. And no. Yeah, I was very good friends with the people I was consorting with at that time. And I'm not going to say that people don't lace weed, but the people I was dealing with aren't going to spend $100 on a $10 dime bag that's going to kill you. If anything, they'd be trying to make customers by getting you addicted, and that's not beneficial to anybody. And if you don't know that about the streets, that's fine. You just learned something new. So there's another false narrative. And then I don't know. My stepdad, at this point, he just creates them in lies. I mean, yeah, I don't know how he does it, but he somehow manages to get his way out of all this. I mean, you got to remember, like, I'm from a family that watched a grown man put a child's head in the toilet while the mother sat there shaking in terror. And these days, everyone's like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? So it is what it is. And again, I told you, I do believe it to be impossible to identify, is the person you've shoved out of your family the schizophrenic, or is he still hiding there with a big old smile on his face because he's getting away with it all? I would venture to bet that it's probably more often the latter, right? Yeah, because I mean, it's not like my mom somehow believes that some children are like born natural criminals and some aren't. She watches too much TV, to be honest with you. That's another one of those false narrative dot connecting that shouldn't be there. They both watch too much TV and believe everything on TV. So when I started having problems, all my stepdad had to do was like, oh, that's because he doesn't know his dad. He's supposed to be, broken and out of control and one of the criminal people. So I mean, it goes both ways. In my opinion, uh, they're both just spoiled. And if they would say the same about me, so I will define this. To me, spoiled is someone who was allowed to feel safe, up to the ages of like 6 and 8, because that's when your brain is developing how to process fear and stressors and stuff like that. And if you have a psychotic schizophrenic taking his temper out of you all the time, like you'd be in a state like I am all the time, which is not, one could identify it as hell, but it's manageable to an extent as long as you know how to stay healthy and get healthy. So yeah, so there's that. Yeah, and we'll see how it all pans out. But there you have it. There's your first episode of S.O.S. Connecting dots that aren't there, pieces that aren't there. And if you really pay attention, man, schizophrenics give it all away. You just gotta, once they say something that doesn't make sense, and you're just like used to being like, it doesn't make sense. They're counting on that. If you would have stopped and been like, hey, what is this? They're gonna change their story. and then that's not going to make sense. And you're going to say, what is that? What are you talking about? And then they're going to change your story again. So if you really watch them, you'll get them to skip over their words and keep changing stories until, I mean, you'll just have to walk away. A true schizophrenic cannot admit wrongdoing without going into like an extremely aggressive, depressive psychosis. Yeah, usually self-harm is the byproduct of that. When anytime somebody is schizophrenic is able to accept it. All right. So there you have it. I've had kind of a rough week. My birthday's in 2 days, so I'm a little bit tired and stuff. So don't mind if I seem a little bit off. But yeah, we'll start the S.O.S series, and I've got some good stuff coming, some good stories. If you're looking for that string to hold on, there'll be some of those. If you're looking to be informed, there'll be some of that. And if you're just intrigued by the human condition and my breakdown and understanding of it, then by all means, just try to be respectful in comments because these videos are made for people that are suffering severely to try to get back up. I will erase anything really evasive on here. All right. So thanks for stopping by. Peace and blessings, and enjoy the series.